Welcome back to The Last Sip. It's been 1 month since the killing of Brazilian Councillor Marielle Franco. Her murder is widely believed to be a politically driven assassination of a woman of color working to change her community from the ground up. Here to talk about the latest in her case and why it's important to the world is Glenn Greenwald, co-founder of the Intercept, and Erica Williams, associate professor of anthropology at Spelman College and incoming chair of the sociology and anthropology department there. Glenn, bem-vindo para vocês dois. Glenn, you're joining us from Rio, and Marielle was your friend. Just first off, can you tell us what she was like and why she was so special?
She was special on every level. Obviously, politically, she was an extraordinarily important figure for the city because there hadn't been a black woman on the Rio City Council in 10 years, even though the city is more than 50% black. She came from one of the most deprived favelas in the city, in Maré. And black women from favelas don't often come into positions of prominence and significance. And at the same time, she was LGBT and an outspoken feminist. So this combination made her unbelievably unique just in and of itself, let alone the force with which she advocated for the traditionally voiceless in this country, the bravery she displayed in standing up to the most powerful factions. But then there was this personal side of her that those of us who were lucky enough to be friends with her were able to see. There are a lot of politically prominent people I know whose politics are really good in the abstract and it doesn't quite translate into their personal conduct. Marielle was exactly the opposite. As strong and brave and principled as she was as a public figure was how compassionate and kind and generous she was in her personal life, not to powerful people, but to everybody. And I guess, the thing that I remember the most about Marielle, my husband, David Miranda, who served on the city council with her and was her best friend, or certainly one of her best friends, gave a speech the day after she was killed. And he talked about how whenever Marielle was in the room, all eyes were on her. There was just no forgetting or ignoring or neglecting Marielle. Not because she did anything to call attention to herself, but just because she was just such a singularly charismatic, confident, and powerful woman.
So what's the latest on her case in terms of the investigation and where things stand in that regard?
Well, it's all a little bit unclear because the assassination, and that's what it was a political assassination of Marielle, took place very early on in the military intervention of Rio de Janeiro, the first time since the military dictatorship in 1985 ended, that the military was deployed here. So ironically, it happened right under the noses of the military deployed here to secure the safety of the city and its residents. It's the primary focus of the investigation are on what's called the militias, which are kind of like mafia organized crime rings, but they're linked to the police and they're linked to the military. The execution was carried out with extreme levels of professionalism and skill and competence. Whoever did it knew exactly how the police investigate murders. And amazingly, there are 51 members of the city council, and at least 5 to 7 of them have been identified by an investigation in which Marielle participated, in which her party led, that identified them as leading members of these militias. Several of whom she had personally confronted in a very kind of direct way. And they seem to be the leading suspects.
Wow. Erica, recently you and a group of other black women academics wrote an open letter to Folha de Sao Paulo, which is Brazil's largest newspaper, to highlight the importance of her life and death. Why do you think that she's important to women of color in the United States? And generally, what's her significance within the Brazilian context of blackness?
Originally, the open letter that we wrote is called On the Imperative of Transnational Solidarity, a U.S. Black Feminist Statement on the Assassination of Marielle Franco. It originally started with us kind of being in conversation on Twitter about the the assassination of Marielle Franco. And as Black women who have been doing research in Brazil for, at least 10 to 20 years, we were very much struck by as you said, as Glenn said, the brazenness of this case. So unfortunately, my work has been based in Salvador and Bahia in the northeast of Brazil. So I didn't have the opportunity to meet Marielle Franco. And I was made aware when Keisha Perry tweeted about her assassination, and immediately I started digging in, learning more about her. And the more I read about her, she just struck me as so many women that I've known and gotten a chance to meet in Bahia. Black feminist activists who have been organizing and mobilizing. They were involved in organizing the 2015 Marcha das Mulheres Negras that took place in Brasilia. And this march was, they called it against racism and genocide and for Bem Viver, which is like the good life or good living. So this march mobilized tens of thousands of Afro-Brazilian feminists. So over the last, 5 or so years, I've been kind of tracing Black feminist activism in Bahia. And the more I read and learned about Marielle, she symbolized and she just kind of represented so much of what we have been struggling for both in Brazil and in the US, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that police brutality and genocide against Black people is a huge problem in both countries. Mm-hmm. And so many Black feminists have been outspoken about these issues. Mm-hmm. And to see her brutally murdered in that way was it just kind of struck all of our hearts. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to kind of call attention to it because we wanted to make it clear that the US needs to pay attention to this, that we need to listen and know and learn from what's happening in Brazil. And we need to kind of be connected in these transnational struggles.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you both for joining us to give us an update on where things stand. We're going to keep following this. This isn't going to go away, or at least we're not going to let it go, and we're going to continue to delve into this. And you can also listen to more of this interview in our web extra, so please make sure that you go to our website, thelaststep.org, to see more of that. I particularly, Glenn, I have a question for you with respect to what do you think her death means for the future of intersectional politics in Brazil? I know that, for instance, there's a trans woman that's going to run for federal Congress. I think her name is Indianata. She's running. And so I'm wondering, if this was a political assassination, then it was designed to send a message and to turn back a movement. Is that succeeding?
No, and that's, the only solace I take in this. We spent the first week grieving a friend, and so it was very difficult for me to kind of process the political implications until the rawness of that sadness, which is still very much present. Whenever I talk about Marielle, it kind of at least got under control. And then, there was so many protests in the city, so many events, they kind of kept multiplying. And what was amazing about it was that they were led by Black women from favelas, people who, have been suppressed and kind of taught that their place is not in the streets leading protests, being vocal and making demands. And what was amazing was it almost felt like Marielle's death had spawned tens of thousands of Marielles in a way that was really emboldening and made me feel optimistic about the future of Brazil and the future of Rio de Janeiro and the future of the people who live in it, who for so long have been deprived of hope. And I say that not in a rosy-eyed way, because the first week I was actually worried. I remember the wake and the events had this kind of sense of shock and sadness and fear, because it was designed to terrorize people. As Erica said, Marielle is not the only case of Black women being, attacked and threatened. There's actually a city councilwoman from Niterói who's going to run for Deputado Federal. My husband's also running for Deputado Federal. He grew up in Jacarezinho, which is one of the largest favelas as well, and is LGBT. And so I think that you're seeing this kind of emboldening on the part of the people who for so long were voiceless and kind of put their hope in Marielle. And when she died, at first it was this horror, and now it's becoming a source of strength. And, I hate to talk about Marielle's death as something that can be positive, but what I've seen, the energy in people the resolve, the determination, the anger being converted into political activism is actually encouraging.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that. And Erica, we hope that as you and the group of academics that you're with continue to use your voice, that you'll let us know what you all are doing and what are the updates that you have in terms of spotlighting this important case and this amazing woman who was taken from the world way too early. I want to just thank you both for taking the time, and I'm deeply appreciative of you coming on to speak about her from two really important perspectives. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.